Let's go, Siwash.
All right, here we go. We're back with. Okay, this is what happened.
I love it.
The one thing that's scripted. It's literally the only 5 words.
All right,
Beautiful.
take two.
Oh, we're definitely leaving this in, Nikki.
I think so.
All right, here we are again. I'm here with Nicki and Yannick. And
What's the name of the podcast, Siwash?
Pressure.
Okay.
Take three.
okay, take three. Take three. Here we are again talking about coaching. I'm here with Nicki and Yannick.
Woo!
You got it.
So today's question, Yannick, do you want to share today's question with us?
Yeah, I do. We had a question sitting there for some time, and it took a little while to make it onto the podcast. But somebody asked, and I forgot who it was. They might have not shared it. How long did it take for you to realize you wanted to be a coach? Was it instantaneous, or did it grow on you as you got better? And then it said, excuse the pun, which we had lamented about, what the pun was. I feel as a relatively new dad, I should know. I think there's something that it grows on you. But hey, so the question is about, well, was this like just a decision or not? I'm so curious to know what's behind the question, to be honest, on this one. Because, I don't know, in my mind, there's this story about there's a coach who might question how committed they are to being a coach or how passionate they are about coaching. It's so easy to see all those coaches out there and they're just like so into it and they're like doing all of these things and they're so into the practice and, they just knew instantly that coach, that's my thing. That's totally it, and I think if you don't have that, I mean, there's plenty of professions and jobs that people grow into. So many people are being thrown into leadership positions and it takes them a little while to really embrace that and develop a passion for it. And to others, the born leader, they have always stepped into leadership positions and they always knew that they were going to be in charge of something. Right, so that's the kind of story I'm telling myself, that there's a coach out there who is like maybe feeling a bit weird about everybody being so passionate and into this and fully embracing coaching as their identity. And maybe they have a daytime job and they do coaching on the side and it's still growing on them. So that's kind of what's in my head. For me, it was quite instantaneous. I'm not sure if what the instant was, but like I remember when I found out about coaching, I was studying applied positive psychology at the time and then realized that coaching is a thing. And I had been interested in becoming a psychotherapist or counselor, like creating deep relationship with people, going into depth, having meaningful conversations, helping people out with some profound questions. So, and then as I found out that coaching exists, I remember that this immediately resonated with me a lot more. It was free from the kind of regulation that is often tying therapists' hands. You wouldn't just listening to people's problems or, the darkness, the heaviness that often comes with therapy. And, all the positive psychology knowledge that I was, being confronted with, all of that seems to be perfectly applicable to the coaching setting. All those what's right with you questions, character strength, flow, engagement, happiness, well-being, meaning, purpose, all of this positive psychology stuff seems to be perfectly applied in coaching. I'm like, this is clearly, I mean, I needed to go deeper. That's why I went into the existential kind of foundations. I still wanted to have that kind of therapeutic element, that kind of depth of the conversation in it. But coaching opened and paved the way for me to find an umbrella, an industry, a profession that deeply resonated with who I am as a person. A bit rebellious, autonomous, complexity, range. It's not one thing. Right? I could use all of my strength and I could have a very passionate, energized, creative conversation, which, therapy often is not. So for me, it was quite instantly.
Did you ever have a different career before, Yannick? I forget.
No, I was, I think, part of the first generation who could study coaching
wow.
at master's level straight from, undergraduate psychology. So I did
Wow,
work in
okay.
an organization for a while, but it was a university, right? So it's not really comparable to the kind of corporate machine. But you know, it has corporate structures, at least in the UK. Universities do, trying to be corporate structures. You know, not
So
particularly
your
well
undergrad is
executed.
psychology.
My undergrad is psychology, and
Oh
then I
wow,
was
okay, I
able
didn't know
to
that. That's so
study
cool.
at positive psychology at master's level, and then existential coaching.
Amazing.
So for me, it was always a big part of what I do and the circles I walked in. But I appreciate that's different for other people. How was it for you?
I love Sivash, I love your story.
Oh, okay, cool. Let me. So for me, by the way, before I share my story, there's something that came up while you guys are talking about this, because I think it's such a good question. One of the things I think that's happening right now in the world is people have become so good at sales and marketing that and I think, and when I look at these sales pages about coaching programs and therapy certifications, coaching certifications, they just speak to that desire that so many people have around wanting to help others, having freedom, kind of location freedom, time freedom, working for yourself, not, being your own boss and making money. That is just a lot of people get kind of pulled towards that. And I think that's usually like a small number. God knows what that number exactly is. Could be 10%, 20%. That actually then find out like, okay, this is the part that I want to really commit to. That I want this. I want to make this my career. I've seen so many people kind of stumble on that, either because they just have that desire, or because they've gone through something themselves, like they've gone through some experience themselves, and they want to give back to people. Yeah, that's I think part of the reason, or part of my philosophy around like why coaching has become so popular. And for me personally, well, I was a professional poker player around like 16 years ago. So at the age of 17, 18. So that's when I already started reading coaching books, because I start seeing that, this idea of like working on your mindset, developing emotional like resilience and managing your emotions could really help in performing at a high level. But I never thought this is like being a coach was never for me, like I never considered that as an option. So after leaving poker, I get fate. I got introduced into fate, and because of that, in 2010, I had to change everything, like my habits, my lifestyle. You know, so that again, like looking back, is I was on a personal journey of change, right? Reading a lot of books, about habits, about routines, and about thinking, and on this long journey of I think 6, 7 years, and then I think what was really pivotal was attending UPW with Tony Robbins. So that's like a 4 day, like really intense coaching event, and that had a really big impact on me. But again, still, even then, I didn't realize like, okay, you can actually do this as a career. And it's only when 8 years ago in November I hired a coach, right? And something like get unlocked in me, and I think maybe others can relate to this, like because I've done so much work on myself, and in terms of like reading books, attending conferences, workshops, but there was still something missing. I was struggling in most areas of my life. Financially, I was struggling. Emotionally, like things were difficult. But with that coach, something shifted,
Yeah.
and
So for you, it did grow on you, and then there was a moment. That's really interesting.
yeah,
There's a kind of a
yeah,
combination of the two options.
yeah. I think there was a moment, and I realized like, well, this is what people need, because I see so many people reading all these books but not really improving their life. I see so many people that, for example, go to these workshops, and of course there's exceptions, but I think there's often that's something that's inside. For me, there were some beliefs that were really holding
Yeah.
me back, and he just helped me
Yeah.
shift that. And I was like, well, actually, I've always had a desire to help people. Can I do this? And he was like, yeah, I got 10 clients. I can help you. I can show you how I build this. And then that's kind of how it started. But yeah, that journey has been like a long journey around like thinking it's too hard, and then realizing, okay, I need to really actually get better at I need to learn so many different skills. But for me, that was kind of the pivotal moment where, so actually this coaching, one, I can do this potentially as a career. Two, it's something that really can help people.
Yeah. And how was it for you, Nikki?
Oh wait, I mean, You know what? I can always record mine separately, and I might edit it in because I'm conscious we're running really low on time. But Sivash, I think one of the things that I learned about you quite early on and that really inspired me was that moment, like, it's just the image of it. I think you said you were working in like a fast food place or something. Like, I don't know if you were flipping burgers or something. And it was this really cute story of having this epiphany, and you're like, you quit your job and then went into coaching. Did I remember that right?
No, I think there was a bit of a gap, but what happened is, yeah,
Ah,
I worked like for £4 an hour, and I was hired as a manager, and then basically end up, doing everything, cleaning like toilets, just working 12-hour shifts, long shifts, and by the way, like I was quite lucky. In most of the jobs I worked, I had a bit of a freedom where the manager was not there, so I was listening often to Tony Robbins. Somebody basically, I don't know what do you call that, like somebody downloaded all his work for free, shared the work with me, so I'm just listening to this to this work. Yeah, and then the moment I left my job, by the way, like this is probably a long story, but to make short, I was completely broke, had no money. I left my job, and a couple of my friends are going to this Tony Robbins event, which is like a £600 event. And one of them said, "Okay, I can't go. Can you go? Would you like to go?" And I said, "Yeah, hell yeah!" Like, so I went there again. No money for accommodation. No money for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. We slept with like 5 guys on a double bed, right? So it was. I think a lot of these things, looking back at it, I think like Steve Jobs says, we can connect the dots. I think I was very fortunate and very lucky to kind of go through that.
no, really cool. I like that.
Yeah, and to acknowledge one of the earlier episodes, I do need a minute breather before I start this group.
No worries. I'll edit myself in at the end.
Cool. Yes, because I really do want to hear your story, Nicki.
It's quite different, yeah. Yeah, so for me, my coaching journey is one I think that I would describe as a journey of continuous evolution. Um, the way I found my way to coaching is for 1 year, I was living on a canal boat in London with my partner. And due to not having things like running electricity, I started listening to podcasts, which kind of took up less of kind of the battery on my phone. And I discovered one podcast in particular called The School of Greatness by a guy called Lewis Holmes, who, just to give a little bit of context, was a big kind of name in the American football world, but then due to an injury, had to quit his career. And he started this podcast. And I think I just really enjoyed the kinds of conversations that he was having on this podcast. He kind of managed to get in some really big names, kind of celebrities and all sorts of people who had made extraordinary achievements. And I guess, thinking back of those conversations, I guess they feel very much what like our coaching conversations today. And I think I asked myself at one point, what career would I have to be able to have these kinds of conversations with people? And then I think coaching was mentioned at some point then, when I was still living in London. I looked up the coaching schools and started researching a bit more about coaching and what it was. It kind of, the reason I enjoyed having those conversations makes sense to me in hindsight. For my undergrad, I studied philosophy, and for my master's, I studied sociology. So there was definitely always kind of an interest in people, and also just a curiosity about asking the bigger questions in life. But much like Yannick said, I think the idea of going into therapy and becoming a therapist had never been one that felt right for me, because I think, and actually someone recently told me this, that I'm perhaps a bit of an empath, and it means I think I'm very easily drawn into other people's feelings and emotions, and I think the kind of subjects one tends to talk about in therapy, therefore always I felt like I couldn't probably hold space for other people's kind of sorrows because it would affect me a lot. But I really was drawn to and attracted to this kind of realm of possibility that coaching and the kind of questions people ask themselves, which I guess to me are more philosophical in nature, that really appealed to me. So long story short, I did a coaching course. I ended up choosing a school called Adamas because I really liked, actually, compared to other schools, their very philosophical and academic approach to coaching, as opposed to a very business coaching orientated one, which I felt was kind of the main vibe of other institutions I looked up at the time. And then I really enjoyed that course and was actually like fiercely determined to go into coaching. But as it happened, that was when the world went into lockdown and into COVID. And it immediately put me in a position that I didn't feel comfortable with, because I really saw myself as someone who was going to go out and network and talk to people in person. And that was going to be how I kind of represent coaching and meet hopefully potential clients, because it just kind of asked of me to be me, because that is the kind of conversations I would typically have with people anyway, kind of very, what is the meaning of life and like, what's our purpose kind of conversations. And in my mind, that was how I was going to find my foot into the coaching world. Something that actually, well, this then forced me into the space of online and online marketing. And that was something that in my previous career as a photographer also really held me back and kind of prevented me from succeeding and being as successful as I perhaps had hoped to be with my photography work, because I just heavily relied on getting clients word of mouth and thereby couldn't always generate enough work. And so being put back into that position through obviously a global pandemic that lasted several years kind of immediately created a bit of a mental barrier for me. I think, thinking of my journey as an evolution at the same time as COVID, and though not related to COVID, I also had a lot of changes in my personal life that put me in a position where I felt I was more in a space of needing to be the recipient of emotional support than in the space of feeling like I was operating in the realm of abundance with plenty of capacity and space to give to other people, which I think is what coaching typically demands. And I felt like it was dishonest to myself and dishonest to others, or I realized trying to continue to do it gradually that it wasn't something that I felt was in my capacity. Over time, to continue with the evolution, I then actually moved to Portugal, which was the result of the pandemic ending and needing a bit of a life change, which then actually also resulted in a career change in which I went into surf coaching, which initially I was curious to see if it would have any overlap with coaching in the way that I'd been trained in life coaching. And, though initially I was really focused on kind of teaching people technique and stuff, over time, and now it's my third season in, I've realized that a lot of the coaching skills, life coaching skills that I learned, I can really bring in to really, help my students kind of with, the journey they go on in their surf learning. And in that sense, I've also learned that for me, surfing is so much more than a sport. It is almost like another way of experiencing, a journey in personal development, but through the medium of surfing. But long story short, I've been greatly enjoying kind of seeing a lot of the parallels between life coaching and surf coaching. And that's an area I'd generally like to explore a lot more in my life and future work. But all of that to say that in a roundabout way, I've come back to coaching. And I think what's also worth sharing is that one of the reasons I was really excited about surf coaching was because I thought, oh, in the future, my coaching, I can imagine, would really like to do group coaching. But I had a real kind of fear and imposter syndrome feeling around kind of group life coaching. And I thought, okay, well, if I can learn to talk in front of a group by becoming a surf coach, then that's something that's also going to translate back into my life coaching career when eventually I feel ready to return to that. So yeah, maybe a bit of a long-winded explanation, but I think, an interesting journey because it is a bit more of a meandering one. And at this stage, I think I'm not sure how much longer I will continue to teach surfing per se at a surf school, because I'm finding that now my energy is kind of needing a different kind of work-life balance. And I think in that sense, I could gradually, or I'm thinking gradually of making more of a return into a more sedentary or stationary lifestyle, so to speak, as in, working in front of a computer potentially a bit more, finding more of that balance rather than just being on the beach all day. And so I kind of feel like I'm coming back into coaching as also my personal circumstances are changing. But I think the point is that throughout this whole meandering journey where perhaps, you can lose the sense of where is it connecting to coaching, all of this. But the way I think about it, that connection has stayed there throughout, and everything I read and, everything I tend to still be interested in, all kind of, I think, is a continuation of my journey and evolution as a coach. And I'm so excited to eventually make my way back to it. And I think throughout this time, I've also been really reevaluating my relationship with coaching and its place in the world. And I think it's a continued journey. So I hope that was helpful. And thank you for listening, and see you for our next episode.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for being with us today. I appreciate your commitment to learning and growing as a coach. Just a few things before you go. First of all, we're doing this for you, so if there's anything you'd like us to talk about, do send us a question. Secondly, we're not doing this for profit, so we rely on your support to help us reach as many coaches as we can. So if you can send this episode to a friend or tell a fellow coach about what we're doing here, maybe you can subscribe or leave us a review, or even support us on Patreon. That would be amazing. And lastly, you can find us across all major platforms. So whether you like to watch, or you like to listen, or you like to download episodes and listen to it in your car while you're driving through somewhere with no internet, you can do so too. And that's it from us. Thank you, and I hope to see you next time.